Jasper Reeves never expected his first deep space assignment to end in an accidental marriage. As the newly appointed quantum communications specialist aboard the Earth Diplomatic Corps vessel Meridian, he'd been more concerned about keeping the experimental comm array running than navigating alien courtship rituals. Yet here he stood in the crystalline docking bay of the Nexus station, watching his whole career potentially implode because he tried to help someone. The someone in question, Commander Naira Voss of the Astari Defense Force, now towered over him, her iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to purple as she studied him with unsettling intensity. "You interfered with a sacred combat trial," she stated, her translator rendering her musical language into crisp English. "Do you understand the gravity of your actions?" Jasper ran a hand through his disheveled dark hair. "Look, I saw you fighting those 3 assassins. When one of them was about to shoot you in the back, I just reacted. I didn't know throwing my wrench at him would count as joining the combat." The assembled Astari officials murmured among themselves, their crystalline armor catching the light of the station's artificial sun. Jasper noticed several of them making gestures that his cultural briefings hadn't covered. This was exactly why he'd chosen a technical position. Machines were so much simpler than people, especially alien people. "The laws of combat are absolute," another Astari official declared. "By engaging in the trial alongside Commander Voss, you have declared yourself as a potential bondmate." "I was trying to save her life," Jasper protested. "Surely there's some kind of exemption for emergency assistance." "There is not." Naira's voice carried an odd note that Jasper couldn't quite identify. "Among my people, life bonds are formed through shared combat. By fighting at my side, however briefly, you have initiated the bonding process." Jasper felt the blood drain from his face. "Process? What process?" "I'm just here to maintain the quantum comm array for the peace talks." "The process cannot be undone," the official stated. "Commander Voss must now evaluate your worth as a potential mate. If you are found wanting, the dishonor will affect both our people's negotiations." Great. Not only had he accidentally proposed to an alien warrior, but he might also derail humanity's first major interstellar alliance. The Earth Diplomatic Corps was definitely not going to put this in their recruitment brochures. Naira stepped closer, and Jasper had to crane his neck to meet her gaze. Despite her imposing height and warrior bearing, there was something almost gentle in her silver eyes. "You acted without hesitation to protect another," she said softly. "That speaks well of your character, even if your method was unconventional." "I'm an engineer," Jasper replied weakly. "Unconventional solutions are kind of my thing. But I'm not a warrior. I can barely handle the mandatory self-defense classes." "Perhaps that is exactly what makes you interesting." Naira's scales shifted to a lighter shade of blue. "You saw a problem and solved it with the tools at hand. Among my people, such adaptability is highly valued." Before Jasper could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Astari officials immediately snapped to attention as emergency announcements echoed in multiple languages. "Warning, quantum containment breach detected in Section 7. Cascade failure imminent." Jasper's eyes widened. Section 7 housed the experimental comm array he'd been sent to maintain. If the quantum containment failed, the station could be torn apart at the subatomic level, he breathed. Naira was already moving. "Then we must prevent that. Come, potential bondmate. Let us see how your unconventional solutions fare against this challenge." As Jasper ran after her, he couldn't help but wonder if all alien relationships started with potential apocalypses, or if he was just special that way. Either way, he had a feeling his life was about to become far more interesting than any engineering assignment had prepared him for. The real question was, would he survive long enough to file the paperwork? Section 7's corridors pulsed with emergency lighting as Jasper and Naira raced toward the quantum comm array. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated with each containment breach, making their progress more challenging than Jasper would have liked. The main control room is just ahead, he called out, gripping his tablet. If I can access the system, I might be able to. He stumbled as another gravity wave hit, but Naira's quick reflexes caught him before he could fall. Your species is not well adapted to gravitational shifts, she observed, her scales now a deep green that Jasper was beginning to associate with concern. Yeah, well, your species is unnaturally graceful, he muttered, trying to ignore how easily she'd lifted him. But right now we need to focus on preventing this station from becoming a quantum physics experiment gone wrong. They reached the control room to find chaos. The quantum containment field flickered dangerously, its usual pristine blue energy shot through with unstable red patterns. The Astari technicians who should have been monitoring it were unconscious at their stations. This wasn't an accident, Naira stated, checking one of the fallen technicians. They've been stunned by an energy weapon. Jasper was already at the main console, his fingers flying over the controls. The containment protocols have been deliberately sabotaged. Someone rewrote the core programming to force a cascade failure. He glanced at the unconscious technicians. And they didn't want any witnesses. The assassination attempt during my combat trial, and now this. Naira's scales darkened to a stormy blue. Someone is trying to disrupt the peace talks. Politics later, preventing quantum disaster now, Jasper insisted, diving deeper into the system. The saboteur knew what they were doing. They've locked out all standard override protocols. Can you stop it? Maybe. But not the conventional way. He pulled out his personal toolkit and began removing panels from the console. How do your people feel about extremely unorthodox engineering solutions? Given that we are technically courting, I should probably learn to appreciate them, Naira replied dryly. Despite the dire situation, Jasper found himself grinning. Was that a joke? Did the stern warrior commander just make a joke? Focus on your work, potential bondmate. The quantum field's instability was growing worse, but Jasper had spotted something in the saboteur's code, a pattern he recognized from his work on Earth's quantum networks. This is based on Earth programming architecture. Someone from our delegation helped with this. Naira's hand went to her weapon. Are you certain? The base code structure is definitely human, he confirmed, rewiring connections with practiced efficiency. But it's been modified to work with Astari quantum technology. Which means the saboteur has access to both Earth and Astari technical knowledge, Naira finished. A collaboration between traders from both our peoples. Another alarm blared, more urgent than the last. The quantum field's collapse was accelerating. Jasper looked at his jury-rigged solution and took a deep breath. I think I can force a system reset by overloading the auxiliary power conduits, he explained. It'll fry half the circuitry, but it should stop the cascade failure. And if it doesn't work? Then we'll have about 3 seconds to appreciate the irony of our accidental engagement before we're scattered across multiple quantum dimensions. He met her silver eyes. I need your help. My hands are too small to reach the main power coupling. Without hesitation, Naira moved to assist him. As they worked together, Jasper found their movements falling into an unexpected rhythm. She anticipated his needs, passing tools before he asked, bracing panels as he made adjustments. Ready? He asked, positioning his hand over the final control. Together, she replied, her larger hand covering his. They activated the override simultaneously. The quantum field fluctuated wildly, energy arcing between conduits. Jasper held his breath, watching the readings on his tablet. For a moment, it seemed like his solution had failed. Then, with a final surge of power, the system reset. The containment field stabilized, returning to its normal blue glow. It worked. Jasper sagged in relief, then tensed as Naira pulled him close, her scales now a vibrant purple he hadn't seen before. You continue to prove interesting, Jasper Reeves, she said softly. Perhaps this accidental binding is not so unfortunate after all. Before he could respond, a squad of Astari security officers burst into the control room, weapons ready. Behind them came Earth Diplomatic Corps officials, including Ambassador Chen, who took one look at the scene and sighed heavily. "Mr. Reeves," the ambassador said wearily, "would you care to explain why our quantum array is smoking, why you're embracing Commander Voss, and what exactly you've done to our carefully planned diplomatic timeline?" Jasper looked at the smoking console, then at Naira, who still hadn't released him. "Would you believe I was just trying to help? Given your history, yes." The ambassador pinched the bridge of her nose. "Commander Voss, I assume this has something to do with your people's combat bonding traditions?" "The human has proven both resourceful and honorable," Naira stated formally. "I accept the initial bond and claim right of courtship." "Of course you do." Ambassador Chen turned to her aide. "Contact Earth. Tell them we need to update the cultural exchange protocols. And get me whatever passes for alcohol on this station. I suspect we're all going to need it." As the officials began securing the scene and reviving the stunned technicians, Jasper realized his life had just become exponentially more complicated. He had an alien warrior for a potential mate, a mysterious saboteur to uncover, and what promised to be an enormous amount of paperwork in his future. But watching Naira coordinate with the security teams, her scales shifting through colors he was just beginning to understand, he couldn't bring himself to regret throwing that wrench. Sometimes the most interesting engineering problems came with unexpected solutions. In the 3 days since the quantum array incident, Jasper had learned several important things about Astari culture. First, their concept of courtship involved a lot more security briefings than he'd expected. Second, their food was surprisingly delicious, despite looking like crystalline geometry experiments. And third, accidentally bonding with a high-ranking commander meant never having a moment's peace. "Your vital signs indicate elevated stress levels," Naira observed as they walked through the station's diplomatic sector. Her scales rippled with concerned green tones. "That might have something to do with the 3 assassination attempts in the past 72 hours, Jasper replied, trying not to jump at every shadow. "Or maybe it's the fact that someone's still trying to sabotage the peace talks, and we're no closer to figuring out who." "For assassination attempts," Naira corrected. "You were asleep for one of them. That's not helping my stress levels." They reached the secure conference room where Ambassador Chen waited with the station's security council. The atmosphere inside was tense enough to make Jasper's engineer sense tingle with alarm. "The situation has escalated," Chen announced without preamble. "We've discovered similar sabotage attempts at 3 other diplomatic outposts. This isn't just about disrupting our talks, someone's trying to trigger a war." "But why?" Jasper asked, studying the data on his tablet. "Earth and the Astari Empire have no real conflicts of interest. The peace talks are basically a formality to establish trade routes and cultural exchange. Unless," Naira's scales shifted to a deep, thoughtful blue, "someone benefits from keeping us apart." A holographic display activated, showing a map of known space. Ambassador Chen highlighted several sectors. "These regions have reported increased activity from the Crimson Syndicate, a criminal organization that's been profiting from the lack of official relations between our peoples." Smuggling, Jasper realized. Without formal trade agreements, they can charge whatever they want to move goods between our territories. Precisely. Chen's expression was grim. And they stand to lose billions once legitimate trade begins. Naira moved closer to the display, her warrior's training evident in how she analyzed the patterns. The sabotage attempts show both human and Astari technical knowledge. The syndicate must have corrupted officials on both sides. "Which means we can't trust anyone," Jasper concluded. He glanced at his tablet, an idea forming. "But maybe we can use that against them." All eyes turned to him. He'd learned that was usually either a very good or very bad sign. "The quantum array's programming still contains traces of the saboteur's code," he explained. "If we could trace its unique signature through the network." We might identify other compromised systems, Naira finished, her scales brightening with approval. And the officials who corrupted them. It's risky, Chen warned. If the syndicate realizes we're onto them. They're already trying to kill us, Jasper pointed out. How much worse could it get? The universe, it turned out, took that as a challenge. 6 hours later, Jasper found himself crawling through the station's maintenance ducts, following the signal from a compromised communications node. Naira moved beside him with impossible grace, making him feel even more awkward in comparison. In human courtship, she asked suddenly, is it common to hunt criminals together? Usually we start with dinner and a movie, he replied, then had to explain what movies were, which led to a fascinating discussion about Astari entertainment forms. Their conversation was interrupted by voices ahead. They reached a junction where the maintenance duct opened into a larger service area. Through the grating, they could see 3 figures, 2 humans and an Astari, gathered around portable quantum computers. The containment failure was supposed to be foolproof, one of the humans growled. How did they stop it? The engineer, the Astari replied, their scales a mottled red of frustration. He found a way to reset the system. The syndicate is not pleased. The engineer who bonded with Commander Voss, the second human added. If we eliminate them both, it will look like political extremists opposing interspecies relations. Jasper felt Naira tense beside him. Her scales had darkened to a dangerous midnight blue he'd never seen before. They're going to trigger another cascade failure, he whispered, watching the saboteurs work. But this time they'll disable all the safety systems first. The entire station could be destroyed. Not if we stop them. Naira's hand found his in the darkness. Together. He squeezed her hand, remembering how well they'd worked as a team before. Together. But we need to be careful. One stray shot could. The grating beneath them chose that moment to give way with a loud crack. They crashed into the service area in a tangle of limbs and cursing in 2 languages. The saboteurs spun, weapons raised. Jasper had a moment to appreciate the irony, his clumsiness had once again thrown him into combat with Naira. What followed was chaos. Naira moved like liquid lightning, her combat training evident in every motion. Jasper, meanwhile, did what engineers do best, he improvised. He grabbed a power coupling from the wall and threw it at the quantum computers, shorting out their systems in a shower of sparks. The human saboteurs went down quickly under Naira's assault, but the Astari proved more challenging. They engaged in a complex series of strikes that Jasper could barely follow. Taking advantage of the distraction, he accessed the sabotage network through his tablet. Their program's already running, he called out. We have 3 minutes before the cascade failure begins. A bit busy, Naira grunted, blocking a strike that would have taken her head off. Can you stop it? Not from here. I need to get to the main control room. He looked at the fight, then at his tablet, making a quick decision. Cover me. He sprinted for the exit, hearing Naira's shout of surprise behind him. The Astari saboteur broke away from their fight, realizing what he was doing. Jasper ran faster than he ever had in his life, his mind racing through calculations and code sequences. He just hoped he'd live long enough to implement them. Jasper's lungs burned as he sprinted through the station's corridors, the sound of combat echoing behind him. The quantum cascade failure would begin in less than 3 minutes, and this time he didn't have the luxury of a simple reset solution. Warning, critical system failure imminent. All personnel proceed to evacuation points. The station's AI was definitely not helping his anxiety levels. He reached the main control room to find it already in chaos. Emergency lights pulsed in warning patterns as technicians frantically worked at their stations. Everyone out, he shouted, pushing through the crowd. The system's been compromised. Clear the room. Who are you two? One of the Astari technicians began, but stopped when Naira burst through the door, her scales dark with battle rage, dragging the unconscious saboteur. "Do as he says," she commanded. The room emptied quickly. Jasper was already at the main console, his fingers flying over the controls. "They've locked out all the safety protocols and encrypted the override codes. This is way more sophisticated than the last attempt." "How long?" Naira asked, securing the saboteur. 2 minutes before cascade failure begins. Maybe 3 more after that before the station tears itself apart." He pulled up the program's core structure. "The encryption looks like, wait." He stared at the code scrolling past. "I know this pattern. You can break it?" "Better." His hands moved faster, pulling up his personal files. "I wrote it. Part of it, anyway. This is based on my quantum encryption thesis from university." He looked at the unconscious saboteur. "They didn't just copy Earth technology, they stole my specific work. Then you can stop it?" "Maybe. But not alone." He met her silver eyes. "Remember how we reset the system together? I need you to do something like that, but more complicated." "I am a warrior, not a technician," Naira reminded him. "You're also a starry. Your people understand quantum mechanics on an intuitive level that humans can't match. I can write the override, but I need your help to implement it through the crystalline systems." The station shuddered as the cascade failure began. Warning klaxons blared with increasing urgency. "Tell me what to do," Naira said. Working together, they created something unprecedented, a fusion of human programming and Astari quantum manipulation. Jasper's hands moved across the controls while Naira channeled energy through the crystalline interfaces, her scales shifting through colors he'd never seen as she worked. 30 seconds to critical failure, the AI announced helpfully. "Almost there," Jasper muttered, making final adjustments. "The program's fighting back. It's like it's learning, adapting to." He stopped, a horrible realization hitting him. "It's not just my encryption. They used the Genesis Beast's adaptive algorithms too." "The what?" "A prohibited weapons project I consulted on years ago. The program evolves, learns from each attempt to stop it." His mind raced. "But that means it can be tricked," Naira finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Like how you defeated the beast, not by fighting it directly, but by making it defeat itself." Jasper's fingers blurred across the console. "I need you to channel a power surge through the main crystal array. Make it look like we're trying a brute force override. That could destroy the system completely," she warned. "Trust me." Her scales shifted to that vibrant purple he was coming to love. "Always." The surge hit the system like a quantum thunderbolt. The hostile program responded exactly as Jasper predicted, adapting its defenses to counter the apparent attack. In doing so, it left itself vulnerable to the real override. A subtle piece of code slipped through a backdoor Jasper had written into his original encryption years ago. The cascade failure stopped. Emergency systems reset. The station's lighting returned to normal. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the saboteur regained consciousness, took in the situation, and laughed bitterly. "Impressive. But you've only delayed the inevitable. The syndicate has operatives throughout both our governments. You can't stop all of us." "Maybe not," Jasper agreed, downloading evidence from the system. "But we can expose you. The override program recorded everything, all your connections, your communications, your network access. Enough to identify every corrupted official in both Earth and Astari space. And," Naira added with dangerous satisfaction, "enough to freeze the syndicate's assets in both territories once the peace treaty is signed." The saboteur's face went pale. "The syndicate will kill me if I'm captured." "Then perhaps," Naira suggested, "you should consider cooperating in exchange for protection." Before the saboteur could respond, Ambassador Chen arrived with a full security team. As they took the prisoner away, she surveyed the scene with raised eyebrows. Mr. Reeves, Commander Voss, she said carefully, I assume you have a good explanation for why my staff reported you running through the station like charged particles, fighting conspirators, and performing unauthorized quantum experiments. Jasper looked at Naira, who had moved close enough for their shoulders to touch. Would you believe we were on a date? To his surprise, both women laughed. You know, Chen said thoughtfully, given everything that's happened since you two met, I actually would. She shook her head. The official ceremony for the peace treaty is tomorrow. Try not to start any intergalactic incidents before then. As the ambassador left, Naira turned to Jasper, her scales shifting through colors that seemed to combine all the patterns he'd learned to read. Speaking of ceremonies, she said softly, among my people, sharing battle and protecting others forms the strongest bonds. These past days have been terrifying, dangerous, and completely insane, Jasper finished. Then he smiled. And I wouldn't change any of it. Her answering smile was radiant. So you accept the full binding? Well, he pretended to consider, I did already write a quantum override program for you. That's basically an engineer's love letter. She pulled him close, and Jasper decided that some accidents worked out perfectly after all.